Good day everyone. Today, we will be discussing about the Philippine government under the Japanese occupation. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the United States of America by bombing the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The attack was carried out by the Imperial Japanese Navy with approximately 350 aircraft. The assault resulted in the destruction of U.S. battleships, aircraft and military installations, and killing over 2,400 U.S. personnel. The Japanese objective was to take down the U.S. Pacific Fleet for Japan to operate freely in the Pacific without American interference and invade Philippines freely. The attack on Pearl Harbor, carried out with the declaration of war, enraged President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and in response, on December 8, 1941, the United States declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II. Also, on December 8, 1941, 10 hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japan launched their surprise attack on the Philippines. The Japan also attacked both American and Filipino bases, including the Clark Field, the American main air base in the Philippines. Following the raids, Japan troops landed both north and south of Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur, American and Filipino, were forced to withdraw to the Bataan Peninsula and the island of Corregidor.
The Bataan Dead March was a tragic event during World War II that occurred after fall of Bataan in the Philippines on April 9, 1942. Following their surrender to Japanese forces, approximately 76,000 American and Filipino soldiers were taken as prisoners of war. The Japanese forced these soldiers to march about 65 miles from Marvelous on the southern tip of the Bataan Peninsula to San Fernando, where they were then transported by train to Capas. From there, they were forced to march another 9 miles to Camp Adenel, a Japanese prison camp. The march was characterized by extreme brutality. The prisoners, already weakened by months of fighting, starvation, and disease, were given little to no food or water during the march. Those who collapsed from executions or illness were often beaten, bayoneted, or shot by the Japanese guards. Prickly heat, lack of the medical care, and harsh treatment led to the deaths of thousands of soldiers during the march. Estimates suggest that between 5,000 to 10,000 Filipino and American soldiers died during the journey. And Dead March became a symbol of a Japanese cruelty and was later classified as a war crime. Survivors of the march endured harsh conditions in a Japanese prison camp for the remainder of the war. It remains one of the most tragic episodes in the Philippines and American military history.
The fall of Corregidor occurred during World War II on May 6, 1942, when Japanese forces captured the island fortress of Corregidor in the Philippines, located at the entrance to Manila Bay. Corregidor was a key defensive position for the Allied forces, and its fall marked a significant defeat for them in the early stages of the Pacific War. The battle was part of the larger campaign to control the Philippines, which had been invaded by Japan in December 1941. Despite fierce resistance from American and Filipino troops, including a prolonged siege and intense fighting, the Japanese eventually overran the island after a series of coordinated attacks. The fall of Corregidor led to the surrender of the remaining Allied forces in the Philippines and solidified Japanese control over the archipelago for the next 2 years until the Allied retaking of the islands.
The puppet government, or the Second Philippine Republic, is a Japanese imperial sponsor government established during the Japanese occupation on World War II in the Philippines. The Second Philippine Republic, 1943 to 1945, established by the Japanese during their occupation of the Philippines. This government was led by Jose P. Laurel. Collaboration. The Laurel government collaborated with the Japanese by suppression of resistance. They actively suppressed Filipino resistance group, helping the Japanese maintain control. Economic cooperation. They implemented policies that benefited Japan's war effort, including providing resources and labor. Propaganda. They spread Japanese propaganda and promoted the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, a Japanese vision for Asia.
During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, 1942 to 1945, there were Filipinos who collaborated with the Japanese either willingly or under coercions. Collaboration took various forms, including political, military, and economic support.
Kapisanan sa paglilingkod sa bagong Pilipinas, Kalibapi, was a political party established by the Japanese during their occupation of the Philippines. In World War II, founded in 1942, it was created to considerate Japanese control over the country and foster collaboration with Filipinos. Kalibapi was the only legal political party at the time, and it was responsible for supporting Japanese policies and executing their directives. By establishing Kalibapi, the Japanese aimed to influence the political environment and ensure their dominance in the Philippines during the occupation.
Comfort women. The term comfort women refers to women who were forced or coerced to provide sexual service to Japanese soldiers during World War II. This system was established by the Japanese Imperial Army to provide sexual outlets for their troops. The word comfort is used euphemistically to describe the harsh reality of their abuse. The Japanese military used comfort women as wartime prostitutes in two wars during the first half of the 20th century. Although the makeup of these women and the tactics used to recruit them varied in both the Asia-Pacific War and World War II, comfort women were used as a component of Japanese military strategy. The Japanese used these women to improve the morale of their troops and to prevent civilian women from being raped in newly conquered areas. The government's goal varied significantly from the actual experience of the comfort women, who were systematically raped and, in many cases, violently. Although these atrocities clearly constitute a war crime, rape was not employed as a weapon of war against these women because the historical and contemporary legal definition of rape as a weapon of war do not apply when Japanese motives and intentions are further analyzed. The Japanese committed war crimes against the Korean comfort women and the Asia-Pacific War and World War II. However, these egregious human rights violations do not constitute the use of rape as a weapon of war by the Japanese.
During the Japanese occupation of the Philippines, the Red House or Bahay na Pula served as a garrison for Japanese soldiers. In this mansion, captured women were imprisoned and exploited by the Japanese soldiers. Aside from exploitation, the victims were also subjected to extreme torture.
The Japanese occupation of the Philippines was a dark period in the country's history, marked by widespread atrocities and human rights violations. The Japanese military, driven by a brutal ideology of racial superiority, committed numerous war crimes against the Filipino people. One of the most horrific aspects of the Japanese occupation was the human experimentation conducted by Japanese doctors and surgeons on Filipino civilians. These experiments were often carried out under the guise of medical research, but in reality they were cruel and inhumane. Victims were subjected to a wide range of gruesome procedures, including amputations, dissections, and vivisections. Many of these experiments resulted in severe pain, suffering, and even death. The human experimentation conducted by the Japanese was not only a violation of medical ethics but also a clear war crime. After the war, the perpetrators of these atrocities were brought to justice and faced severe punishment. However, the scars left by these horrific acts continue to haunt the Philippines today.
The Philippine resistance during World War II, particularly the guerrilla campaigns against Japanese occupation, played a crucial role in the country's struggle for freedom. After the fall of the Philippines to Japanese forces in 1942, many Filipinos refused to accept Japanese rule and organized into guerrilla groups. These resistance fighters, both military and civilians, conducted sabotage operations, intelligence gathering, and direct attack on Japanese forces. The guerrilla movement was diverse with various groups operating independently and often under harsh conditions. Key figures in the resistance included leaders like Luis Tarok of Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon or Hukbalahap and other local commanders who mobilized support and resources. Their efforts were significant in disrupting Japanese supply lines and operations, contributing to the eventual liberation of the Philippines by Allied forces in 1944 to 1945. These guerrilla campaigns were instrumental in maintaining Filipino moral and undermining Japanese control, paving the way for the eventual return of the American forces and the restoration of Philippine sovereignty.
Loyalty to the United States. Since the Philippines was a U.S. territory in the early 20th century, there has been a long history of loyalty to the United States there. A generation of Filipinos schooled in American administration and principle was fostered by the establishment of political, legal, and educational system in the Philippines by United States during its colonial control. Filipinos have a strong sense of allegiance because of their common history and belief that the United States is their protector. The Philippines and the United States remain close even after their independence in 1946, thanks to military alliances and cross-cultural interaction. Given the complicated history and continuing relationship between the two countries, Filipinos continue to have a strong sense of belonging to the United States.
General MacArthur return. General Douglas MacArthur returned to the Philippines on October 20, 1944, was a significant moment in World War II. After being forced to evacuate to the Philippines in 1942, MacArthur famously promised I should return. His return to Leyte Island fulfilled that promise and boosted morale for both American and Filipino forces. MacArthur's departure. After a fierce defense against the Japanese invasion, MacArthur was ordered to evacuate the Philippines in March 1942. He left behind thousands of American and Filipino soldiers, many of whom would be captured and injured the infamous Bataan Death March. The promise to return. MacArthur's departure was a blow to morale, but he famously declared, I should return, a promise that resonated with the Filipino people and became a rallying cry for the Allied forces. Island Hopping Campaign. MacArthur led the Allied forces in a series of island hopping campaigns across the Pacific, eventually reaching the Philippines in 1944. The return to Leyte. On October 20, 1944, MacArthur waded ashore on Leyte Island, fulfilling his promise. His arrival was met with cheers and relief from the Filipino people. The liberation of the Philippines. MacArthur's return marked the beginning of the liberation of the Philippines. His forces, along with Filipino guerrillas, fought their way across the islands, eventually liberating Manila and other key cities.
On October 20, 1944, General Douglas MacArthur led American and Allied forces in a significant amphibious landing on the island of Leyte in the Philippines. This event marked the beginning of the Philippines' liberations from Japanese occupations, which had lasted since 1942. The Leyte landing was a pivotal moment in the Pacific theater on the World War II, as it the stage for a series of battles that would ultimately drive Japanese forces out of the Philippines. MacArthur's return to the Philippines was a highly symbolic, fulfilling his famous promise, "I shall return," made when he was forced to leave the country during the Japanese invasions. The landing of Leyte was also start of the larger Battle of the Leyte Gulf, one of the largest naval battles in history, which effectively crippled the Japanese Navy and secured Allied control over the regions. The liberations of the Philippines was a crucial for cutting off Japanese supply lines and restoring the sovereignty of the Filipino people.
The liberation of the Philippines came in 1945 when American forces, aided by Filipino guerrillas, defeated the Japanese army. This marked the end of the Japanese occupation and the beginning of a new era for the Philippines. However, the country was left devastated by the war and it would take many years for it to recover. The liberation of the Philippines was a momentous event, but it also came at a great cost. An estimated 500,000 Filipinos were killed during the Japanese occupation. The war also had a devastating impact on the Filipino economy and it would take many years for the country to rebuild.
The Japanese established a puppet government, putting Jose P. Laurel as the president to create an illusion to Filipinos in the Second Republic in 1943. Meanwhile, President Manuel L. Quezon, the president and the leader of Commonwealth, fled to the United States with the cabinet and other officials to represent that the Philippines are interested during the war. After Quezon's death, the Americans under General Douglas MacArthur began their movement to reclaim the Philippines. American and MacArthur advanced and landed on Leyte in October 1944, and at the same time, General MacArthur re-established the Commonwealth, playing the role of military administrator and signaling the return of American control and the end of the Second Republic. And in February 27, 1945, MacArthur turned over the reign of government to Sergio Osmeña, who succeeded Quezon as the President of the Commonwealth.
Thank you all for watching this here video.